Hi, everybody. I hope everybody's having a really great night. We are back together from our last week. We were apart doing the show. So I hope you got to watch that and catch up on it. But it's nice to be back together.
Yeah, it's really nice. I had a really good trip,
So tonight we wanted to talk about how to keep your individuality as a couple. And I think, we've just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. And so I was kind of thinking about this, or we were thinking about this, and sometimes you see couples who, when they get married, they can tend to lose themselves in the relationship instead of still being able to maintain a healthy balance between what you bring to the table as a couple and eventually maybe a family, as opposed to still being able to be yourself and being an individual who pursues some of your own goals, still has the dreams and the things that you want to do on your own before you were married that you're still bringing to that relationship. And sometimes, like you've probably seen and I've seen and probably you've seen as well, sometimes those tend to get lost in the relationship, especially right after you get married.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy, especially when it's like new and it's the beginning. You're wanting to spend every moment together. It's kind of easy to get lost in the relationship, and then you kind of lose your way as an individual. And the cool thing is that yes, we need to come together. We need to be one. We need to be able to work together the way that the Lord intended us to. But we also need to remember that we are still individuals. We both have goals and dreams, like Matt said, and sometimes when we do this for a long time, or when we get lost in that relationship, we kind of have questions in the back of our mind that can kind of haunt us. And so we've just seen this in different scenarios, like Matt said, and we've experienced a certain amount of this ourselves. And so we've just really tried to think about, okay, what are some things that make this particular subject important and valid for what we're talking about today and living in today's world in the 21st century as a couple. And so I just think it's really important.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's kind of, like you talked a little bit about, there's this pressure to, especially when you're coming into a relationship and you've been doing your own thing and you've been your own person, you may be living by yourself, you may already have a job on your own, a whole life. But so there's this pressure to then become one, just like the Bible talks about. And so you may kind of almost overcompensate, and because you're trying to be together and get on the same page so quickly. But I think there's this interesting dichotomy, because the more you try to be together, then the more you can really come apart. Whereas opposed if you still had that, where you were both pursuing some things on your own and living your own lives to some degree and having that individualism, then in reality that can bring you closer together.
Yeah, and I think we're, again, we want to emphasize we are talking about still living together, being one, having that unity, but maintaining things like having, and we're going to talk about examples of this, but sometimes we see like any kind of activity apart at all goes to the wayside. So like I go out with my girlfriends, that doesn't, that is totally eliminated once I'm married, or he goes out with some guys and whatever, plays basketball or whatever, that those things are eliminated. And really, like Matt said, that can cause it kind of drive a wedge between two people, because two people still have desires to do things and still are technically living individual lives, but they are living them together. And so we've just seen this so much, and we know that there are just some things that you can do kind of moving forward to help work on this. And another thing I was thinking of too is sometimes even resources are allocated, whether it's money, it's time, it's a certain skills are just put toward what you're doing together in the relationship, instead of allowing for room for both people to be able to allocate some resources other places as well. So I just think there's a lot of different aspects to this. And again, we just want to emphasize, we're not saying that we're not still one, we're not still a couple, that's not important. But we see that, when you maintain that individuality, in that you still recognize you're a different person, I'm not Matt, Matt's not me, then you can really actually bloom where you are, where you're planted. We each have different roles, which is really amazing. God talks about that. And then when you really step into that role as who, what talents God has given you to have, live out and to develop individually, then you can really come together and complement with an E, each other in a really beautiful way. And that's really what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think, that's true. And we're going to maybe talk about this in another episode, but it can go too far to the other extreme where you're so individualistic and you don't it comes across as selfishness, which we never want. Yeah. And, I think too, it depends on the personality of the couple. I think with us, we both are pretty strong in our own, wanting to do our own thing, pretty individual. We can be happy apart, be happy alone. So maybe this may be easier for us than the other side of it. But so it also depends on the couples and your relationship as well. You may tend to be stronger in an area than on the others. Yeah,
I totally agree. I mean, everybody's personality is different too. So, and you might have one person who's like more clingy than another person. I mean, it's natural. We're just talking about finding ways to make this happen. So, one thing that I thought would be really important, we thought it would be really important to talk about kind of before we talk about like the how-tos is sort of the why behind why this is good. And we've already kind of touched on a couple of things, but like one thing that can be really cool is if you learn something new because you start going to a course on whatever it is, then you can actually bring that skill or that knowledge into your relationship, which is really great because let's say that you're doing something together, an activity together, and you have a skill and knowledge, whatever it is that you've developed, that you can bring to the table and actually add value to the relationship, which I think is just incredible. And I think it's really leveraging the fact that you have a relationship, but you're still two individual people. And in just such a beautiful way. I don't know like how else to describe that, but that's kind of what I imagine, when God talks about, people bringing two people together, they're being one flesh, but in that still, they are two people that can add value. God created Eve so that he could complement and help Adam. And I think that's so amazing. I think, here are two people, even in the example of Adam and Eve, that are different people that have different things to bring to the table that can become one in such a beautiful way in that relationship.
Yeah. I think too, going kind of along the same lines, if you are able to work on some of your individual goals, you're developing more confidence in yourself and your abilities to do whatever it is, to continue to grow, to continue to expand, to continue to work on something that maybe you began in high school that you always wanted to do as a child. Yeah. And so your confidence, and as you grow in that skill set, it's going to come back to your family or your spouse in other ways. They talk a lot about being there's a lot of benefits of just talking about exercise. If you exercise more, if you are able to grow that confidence in your body, that translates into all areas of your life, your job, your family, how you feel about yourself. And I think it's the same way. Anytime you're able to develop confidence in a specific area, it's going to translate over into the rest of your life.
Yeah. And I mean, that just kind of goes along with like, doing work that you feel fulfilled in, like work that really lights you up, that gets you going, that wakes you up in the morning. When you're doing that kind of work, whether it's volunteer, whether it's paid, whether it's just being a mom, I mean, I'm saying just, I don't mean it like that, but if that's what you want to do, if that is what lights you up and brings you passion to your life, and you're doing good and all these things, then that's going to help you be happier and in turn be better for your relationship. And so I think there's so much, like Matt said, like you get one area in a good place and that kind of helps to translate other areas. When I'm feeling more alive and passionate and excited and loving and fulfilled, then I'm able to translate that into any other area or even confidence. Another thing that kind of came up when we were talking about this is, we're going to talk about more of the practicals here in a minute, but when you're starting to work out some of these practicals, you have to work them out together. And that's been a struggle for us at times. We kind of touched on this actually in the one about like working at home, working from home with your spouse or whatever, and how a lot of people have had to do that this year and with everything that's going on. And so I thought this was really cool because even though you might be working on individual projects, like Matt might be working on posting for his profile for his fashion side of things, the design man side of things, whereas I might be reaching out to some clients or putting together some sample packs, whatever it is that we're each doing. We have to work together to make sure that those times line up, that we are able to respect those times and all these things. And by working together, we actually grow closer because we're communicating more and we're working as a team. And I mean, we see this everywhere. I just finished the 17 Indisputable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. And I am so impressed with the way that, I've never really been a part of a lot of teams. I'm no sports teams. And so I love like hearing about and reading about these ways where a team can really like leverage abilities and when they work together and all these things. And you have that opportunity with your spouse. And it's so incredible. And when you really tap into that, I don't know, I think we've really seen that.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. The other cool part of this, I think, too, is if you're trying something new, if your spouse shares with you that they want to pursue something, whether it's a side hustle, whether it's writing, whether it's volunteering somewhere, teaching Bible class, maybe you didn't know that about them, but that's something that they're reaching back from their past that they wanted to pursue that they haven't been able to. And so you're slowly unraveling the levels of that person that you may not have known before. And it may be something that you've known them for 5, 10, 20 years, and they're just bringing this to the table. And then that's kind of cool because you're learning a new side of them. You're learning something that maybe you didn't know before, and you can watch them grow in that. I mean, for me, it's been really cool to watch Megan. When we first met, she didn't like reading. She hated reading. Like, I would talk about reading books, and it was like a blank stare.
Shameful.
And she's really, and not because of me, but just on her own, she's really grown into that aspect of her personality and what she's passionate about. And so that's been really cool because 15 years ago, I thought she didn't like books and reading. And so seeing those changes and adaptations keeps things exciting and keeps you learning something new about your spouse, which is really cool.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, it's so cool actually in that way to like see or learn something new about your spouse, or even see them learn something new about themselves, right?
Yeah.
I think I mentioned it a while back, but I did some prompts from the Success Principles by Jack Canfield, and one of the prompts was a bunch of different questions. You remember that? And one thing I learned about myself was that I love parks. Yeah, and so we ended up visiting several parks before we moved from Indiana, and here we've gone to different parks. And so Matt's learned that about me, and I've learned that about myself, that I really love parks. I love going to a new park. And so we've just learned that about each other and learning about ourselves, and it's this great like way that we can continually grow and be working together, and knowing each other's passions is helpful. So.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about the growth mindset some on here before, but I think this is a really important point, that growth, I think sometimes especially if you grow up in a Christian family, in a conservative family, there's these like levels that you get to, and then you've reached it, you've made it. And so you have, you go to high school just like everyone, you go to college, then you start looking for a spouse, you get a job, you start looking for a spouse, and then you're good,
You're good.
And I don't mean that in a bad or negative way, but some people, I feel like, view it to that extent, that, then they get married, and then after a few years they have kids, and then, you're kind of set. But we all know in the natural world, if you're not growing, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? We see these with plants and everything, and it's the same way with us, don't you think?
I totally agree, and I'm gonna get a little bit on a soapbox here because I think part of me used to think this way, and what we're asking and we're inviting you guys to do with us is to challenge the way that you've been thinking and to live that no more some days life. And so what that's going to require is thinking in a new way. And when you're growing, oh my goodness, and you're able to just pour into yourself, or be able to grow as like whatever skills or talents or what abilities, whatever it is, you're bringing so much more to the table. And what I want to challenge you to think about is everything you've done education-wise, let's say up to college, prepared you for now to go and pursue the things that you want to be able to pursue. And here's the thing, here's the kicker. Your growth doesn't stop, let's say, for our example, at marriage or kids. Because in fact, I want to challenge you to think that it's actually when you need to start growing more. It really is, because I did this. I turned off my brain to a certain extent and stopped growing, especially as a person. And when I started growing as a person, it just contributed to our relationship, to other relationships, to career stuff. I mean, it just poured out into other areas in such a beautiful way. And you guys, if you want to be the parents you want to be, if you want to be the Bible class teacher you want to be, if you want to be the leader you want to be, the CEO, the business owner, the spouse, the sister or brother or daughter or father or friend, whatever it is, you need to keep growing. And I'm telling you, you've got a lot to grow in the future in a great way. And really where you need to, the time to really grow and to be your own teacher is now. And it's so incredible to see that in my own life. I was taught that growing up, but I kind of turned my brain off to that. And then when I started doing that, it's just like things just started to open up for me in such a great way.
Yeah, and I think it just kind of goes back to the mindset of our education. We feel like our education mindset is kind of from, after college you're good, unless you go get a master's degree or whatever, you're kind of good. And we kind of take that into our other areas of our life that even unfortunately probably to some extent I've carried over into my spiritual life is, well, I've got all the basics. I'm a Christian now. I've gone through Sunday school. I've gone through all the classes. And now I'm kind of good to go for a while. I don't need to continue to grow in that area. And I think obviously you have to challenge yourself. And I totally agree that the more responsibilities you're taking on, whether as a husband, as a wife, as a father, as a mother, I mean, that's when those people need you more to step up and grow, because they're going to look to you to help them grow. And if you haven't been growing yourself, then how can you help them?
Right.
And so before we move on to our next point, just kind of maybe a practical analogy. As we were talking about this, we were thinking, a good way to think about this, at least for me, was when we think about the explorers that used to be sent out by countries, you think Spain, and especially who sent out these explorers to go find the new world or find different things and bring back either spices or gold or whatever treasures to the homeland. The goal was always for that explorer to go out and bring something back of value to the country. It wasn't for them to go off on their own and get acclaim and get freedom and just be selfish. It was always to bring things back to the home country. And that's how I think you can think about this. We talked about making sure it's not a selfish pursuit. If you're going out and getting better in whatever area it is, whether it's health, career, spiritual, the goal is always for you to get better so you can bring those resources, bring that value, bring that characteristics back to your family and your spouse to help them grow.
Back to the home. Yeah. Exactly. Totally agree. So I think at this point, we're ready to talk about, okay, so how do we make this happen? What's the how-to? And I don't know, I think a great way to that we've done that, with this, that has just worked well for us is just kind of giving each other space to dream and to explore what they're excited about or what they want to pursue. And this has looked a lot of different ways for us. It's looked like me kind of poking and prodding sometimes at Matt. He's been so patient with me. But he's explored a lot with writing and with writing some books and being able to go through that process and self-publish and all the different things. For me, it's looked like me starting my Arbonne business and being able to pursue some exercise things that I had wanted to pursue, or even just some general interests that we've had that we've just wanted to explore, maybe take a course on, or maybe get more knowledge about. Matt took some different drawing lessons. There's just sorts of different ways that this can look. There's not like a one size fits all. I think it's just communicating about what it is that you want, and that's kind of another thing that we talked about is like this is going to require communication, and not just like, hey, so someday, Matt, I would really like to do something with like beauty or maybe health. I'm not really sure what it's going to look like. It's not a conversation with a lot of maybes and stuff like that.
It's no more some days.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the embodiment of that. There has to be
someday.
There has to be a time. I mean, you think about goals. It has to be a time commitment. It has to be specific. It has to be clear on what you're wanting. And as a spouse, it's both our responsibilities to cultivate that environment where your counterpart is comfortable coming to you and saying, I would like to explore X.
Right.
And hopefully, like we've talked about, that may be some budget requirements, time requirements.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be a sacrifice potentially on your side for supporting your spouse's exploration and creativity. And so there has to be an environment that's welcoming to that. There has to be the resources that's welcoming to that, because especially once you introduce kids into the mix, then that's can be more difficult and more of a sacrifice.
Yeah, maybe you spend some time watching the kids or putting them to bed to help your spouse pursue that goal. And I think too, it's looking each other in the eye. It's like Matt said, being really clear, hey, I really want to pursue something with health and beauty or whatever it is. I'm just giving like a generic example for myself. Although it was never really in my mind this way. But, getting as clear as you can, it doesn't mean you need to have all the specifics, and saying, hey, I would really like to pursue something like this. I would really like to explore something like this. Could we find, I found these different courses. Could we maybe budget or find a way, save to be able for me to, enroll in culinary school or whatever it is, whatever the thing is. And you got to strike that balance with your spouse. You've got to find what that is going to look like, because obviously it can't be all of the resources suddenly allocated to that. But this can be a really beautiful way where you can then support each other. And that can look in a lot of different ways too. That was another thing we talked about. We've supported each other in a lot of different ways.
Yes, we've tried to. I think, we've tried to, and, we try to cheer each other on in whatever is going on. I think it's incredibly important for your spouse to support you in whatever it is. Even if you may not totally understand why they're wanting to pursue that. It may not be something it may be something new, and you think, why, I didn't even know you liked that. I didn't know you wanted that. And I think that, like I said, that environment of support and nurturing is so important to allow them the space, the comfort to come to you with that is just so critical. And then that you build on that, and you help if they need to be accountable, if they need somebody to help cheer them on more, then you're able to do that. And I think a big part of that is just the attitude that you both come to the table with when somebody comes to you with that.
No, I think that's so true. I mean, if you come to the table with an open mindset and heart and a willingness to just listen and hear what they have to say, that's already going to make that conversation go so much smoother.
And I think if there's a way that you can get them to be part of the thing, like if you say, hey, I really need help with finding the best course, can you help me? I know I really value your input. Or can you help me come up with a budget or figure out a way to pay for this? Or can you help me, whatever it is? Then you get them be part of the team, be part of that journey that you're going on. Not that you're doing it together necessarily, but that they feel like they're supporting you and that you're critical to their success. Then it's not just you out on your own doing your own thing. This is part of the team. This is part of what our family is doing together. I think that's really, really important as well.
Yeah, no, I think I just think about in moments in my life and in our journey where we've done this well and where we haven't done this well. And there was something today, in fact, that I brought up to Matt. I said, hey, I would like to do this conference. It's online, but and here, I've budgeted for it. Are you okay with this? Is this something that You know, we had planned to do something else, and then because of COVID, but you know, we talked about it and we worked through it together, and it was a simpler conversation because we've had other conversations where I've said, hey, I really think these kind of conferences are very, very important to what I'm doing, and they're contributing in these ways, and I've included him in that conversation. And that just takes plain work. I mean, it really does. You know, I think just something that you touched on too is just like words of affirmation. Just saying something to your spouse sometimes can mean the world. And there's been moments where we've both been, you know, just feeling down about our goals. You know, you're going to have those moments. It's life, right? But when the other person can come in and give words of affirmation and really help lift you up in that way, it is so powerful. And again, it's like another moment where you can grow closer, an opportunity to grow closer because you have those conversations and because you're choosing to support them in that moment, instead of, you know, again, it's all about the attitude that you approach things with.
Yeah.
And also just letting them in on what you're doing. You know, if they don't know what that's like, or they may not have to know what it feels like, but you know, if they have no idea what you're doing, then it may be hard for them to support you and give you good words of affirmation. So try to, again, like, yeah, include them, kind of help them understand the process of what you're doing and you're going through. You know, one thing too that we talked about kind of earlier, we touched on is, you know, having your own friends that you can, you know, I don't know, do things with, bounce ideas off of, you know, have a girls' night out or have time with the guys or whatever that looks like. Because I think when we don't take that time away, then again, we kind of get lost in the relationship, and sometimes we've talked about this a lot, but sometimes we need those other influences in our life, like mentors even. And so having those other influences can be just really helpful, really balancing for your life. And, you know, it's funny, it's kind of a silly example, but I was watching this show the other day, and this couple in the show were spending 24/7 together. And an older, grandfather comes along and he talks to the guy and he says, you know, this job opportunity came up for you for a few days a week, for a few hours. Why don't you take that? But before he says that, he says, you know, when my wife was alive, you know, it was really hard being out. He would be gone a lot. And when he came home, he loved her all that much more. And he kind of talked about that. And sometimes you just need that little bit of space to be away. It's not all the time. It's just occasionally to have that time to kind of rejuvenate, be with friends, and then come together. And it's that much sweeter. It's that much stronger. You love them that much more when you come home and you give them a hug or whatever. So. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that tribe that you build around you is so critical. You know, we can live such insulated lives sometimes where we're just in our homes doing our own thing with just a very small group of people, and getting out and being able to interact. I totally think guys need to be with guys, women need to have time with their girlfriends, and you help grow in different ways through those activities, and you just become a better person overall as long as you're surrounding yourself with the right people.
Right.
But I think those times are extremely vital, and any time that I see that couples shy away from that and start limiting that, I think that's extremely dangerous and extremely counterproductive, because you could be so much better, like we talked about earlier with the exploration. It's not selfish. This is really going to be better for them and better for you as a couple if you all have the availability and there's no fear in saying, I'm going to go out with the guys tonight, I'm going to go out with the girls tonight, and there's no fear of that being a problem. I mean, that's going to bring so much more to your relationship in the long run.
Yeah, I was thinking about, just came into my mind, this example. I used to not think why this was important. And I read the book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And it's seriously one of the most life-changing books I've ever read. And I actually took my time reading it and did every exercise. And one of the things that she talks about in this book is that your life is kind of divided up into quadrants. So if you think about it like there's a box, and then you have like 9 different little squares within that box. So you're the box and you're divided into 9 different squares, different aspects of your life. So like spiritual aspects, play, career, your relationships with your spouse, with friends, that kind of thing. So there's 9 different boxes. And she talked about this woman who got divorced, and you could also apply this to like if you lost your spouse, heaven forbid. And she didn't have those 9 boxes very clearly in her, sorry, my phone, very clearly in her life. She didn't have a lot of balance between the boxes. So her relationship took up all the boxes, or very, very close to all of them. I can't remember. And her point with that was when her husband divorced her, she didn't even know who she was, because she kind of got lost in the relationship, and her identity kind of became her husband's instead of her own. And so obviously I don't want you to prepare for a divorce. That's horrible. But what we are saying is that when you're more balanced of a person, her point with that is when you're more balanced as a person, you're able to be your own individual self. And should something horrible happen, you're okay. You're still a balanced person. It's not going to mean that you're not going to grieve or any of that. But it allows you to be more whole and actually contribute more to the relationship, because you're not feeling so dependent and unhealthily on the other person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, just there's a culture that's been going on for several years that, there is no difference between the sexes. We're all the same. And we just know that's not true. And there's some things that I can't give Megan that some of her girlfriends are going to be able to give her.
Right. There's
some things that I need from other guys that Megan can't give me. And that's a good thing. And so we need to embrace that part of us. And like Megan was saying, if I'm expecting Megan to fulfill every single thing, there's some things that she just can't fulfill, no matter how good she is or how hard she tries. There's some things that she can't, because I need to get that from either whether it's a peer my age that's a guy, or whether it's an older mentor that's a man. There's just certain things that we can't necessarily give. And so expecting your spouse to give 100% of what I need is just unfair, and is going to lead to more problems.
Yeah. I think this is, I realize this is kind of a little bit, I don't know, I feel like this sort of thing isn't talked about a lot. But I think we both experienced how this can really drive a wedge actually in your relationship, instead of bring people together. And we've seen examples of it, and it's just something that we think is so important when you're going about building that relationship, being the people that you want to be, pursuing the things you want to pursue, living that no more some days lifestyle. It's invaluable. So I think that's all we had.
Yeah, and this is our 11th episode. So if you've watched a few episodes, I'd love in the comments if you'd say like what was your favorite episode, or what's one takeaway that you've gotten so far. That would be really helpful. And like Megan mentioned in the last one, that we have some things coming hopefully soon to share with y'all. And we've been, at least I think we've really enjoyed doing this. Yes. And continuing to hopefully bring value to you all. And we'd love for you to share with your friends, with family, and subscribe on YouTube as well.
Yes, thank you.
Have a good week.
Appreciate it.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.